and welcome to another freshly baked episode of Not Another Whiskey Podcast. I am Nicholas Polacki, joined as always by the man who spends more time outdoors than Yogi Bear, Mr. Mitch Bouchard. Mitch, say hello.
Oh, hello. Mate, I liked your hello there. It was like, hello. It's very Scottish.
Hello there. Thank you for tuning in to Not Another Whiskey Podcast.
Right, now, before we get carried away with our own stories, today is a fun episode for me, as we don't just have a guest joining us, but I'm delighted to share it with someone who I'm proud to say has become one of my best mates over the last few years on the show, and it's going to be a good one, Mitch.
Oh, mate, is this going to be one of these ones where you talk about like your famous TV personalities, some global jet setter, and just like piss everyone off and we lose half our listeners again?
Pretty much, mate. Yeah. Anyway, no need for us to pour a drink to drown our sorrows out for this one, as this is a guy who will just pick you up with his own banter. Right, so without further ado, I want to bring in a man who came to the United States, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong on this. He came to the USA on a soccer scholarship. He's pretty handy with a fitbar. He's one of the original whiskey brand ambassadors ever to work in the United States to promote Scotch whiskey, right? So he's 147 years old.
At least.
At least. No, I'm only teasing. Now he's got his own production company and a television show. So you went wrong, Midge. It's called Leave No Trace, where he travels to every continent in the world to explore luxury ecotourism. He did once do a whiskey tasting with Richard Patterson where they shared a dram together. It's called Two Ricks, One Cup. Look it up on Google. Make sure it's not on a company computer. Laddies and lassies, is Mr. Richard Crawford.
Yay! What an intro! And
there you go.
What a get together here. I mean, we were just discussing the last time all three of us were together in West Hollywood.
which we have to keep that part off the show.
Oh, we do. All right.
Correct.
Man, I've listened to your show. In fact, your show is my Monday afternoon routine. So I usually sit on my porch at the house and light up a cigar and pour myself a whiskey and listen to your podcast. It's
there you go.
Very, very enjoyable. Absolutely.
Nice, man. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that, Ricky. But dude, it's great to see you, man. It's been forever. Like we were trying to piece together the last time the three of us were all together. I think it was maybe 2015, 2016, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. I think we'd all just turned 21 and had thrown a big party.
Turned 21 again, aye. Very good.
and thrown a big party.
You know, at that time, I think we worked out you were working for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. But let's rewind a little bit here, man. Let's get all the listeners to know a little bit about you. You know, where did you grow up in Scotland? Take us through this journey that you're now on, living in the US. Let's hear it all, man.
Oh man, so I
not all of it, like condensed version.
Yeah, so I grew up in Paisley, and I actually grew up in a little neighborhood called Fergusley Park, which up until very recently was the most deprived neighborhood in all of Scotland. So and now it's second. So I'm a little pissed off that we've lost that. We've lost that title.
Wait, it came up in the statins because you left. Is that right?
Yes. By 50%. In fact, there's a little British documentary that's floating around on the internet that says Fergusley Park, Belfast in Scotland. It's so crazy. And I would have been about 5 at the time. Anyway, so I grew up in Paisley, came over to the States in the early 90s. I had a soccer scholarship. I wasn't very good, but I was better than most of the Americans, which is all that mattered at the time.
So wait a minute, you couldn't get a game in Scotland? But
no, couldn't. I was last to get picked, even at the 5-a-sides.
So that's funny because the Americans are doing the opposite now. They're buying all these guys like Messi, like all these guys that are going into the 40s and would be washed up in any other league, and they're bringing them over. But you couldn't get a game in Scotland, but you could get a game over there.
No, I could get a game now because, you know, like you said, they're bringing in all the old people. My knees just wouldn't handle it. But yeah, so came to the States, went to school here, went to the good old University of Alabama. And
Roll Tide.
Yeah, had a fun time. It was a culture shock. It's actually more of a culture shock for Alabama than it was for me.
I was going to say, but being for Paisley, wasn't it kind of the same because you were like that in Alabama, you know? You had to marry your sister because your mom turned you down.
Yeah, well, fortunately, my sister couldn't afford a ticket at the time, so I was good. I struggled, like, even listening to this podcast today. Obviously, I've been here in the States for 30 years, so my accent's very much diluted compared to you two. Obviously, you're still back in Scotland, Mitch. But when I first came to the States, God, I nobody understood a word I said for about 2 years. And I used to I used to go through the drive-through like at McDonald's, and it's those speakers are already bad enough. So it's like, you know, and I'd make my order. And they'd be like, "Sir, you're gonna have to come inside and make that order." So I would, and I'd make the order inside, and they'd still say, I just point to the number. I don't have any clue what you're saying. Fast forward a few years, and yeah, got hired by Glenlivet to be their national brand ambassador here in the United States. But there's actually a real cool story behind that if you want to hear it.
Yep, go for it.
There, right? So the position was posted on, I don't know, some website. I think that the internet had just started, and I applied for it with probably about what I was told was about 4,000 people applied for this job, and I had to go through like interview after interview and after interview, and it was down to 2 people, and I went up to Pernod Ricard's head office up in Westchester, New York, and I think the other person that was between was me and Winston Evans. Don't know if you guys know him, Welsh guy. Anyway,
remember him. Yeah.
so I walk into this. I think I've nailed it, right? I'm like, I've 19 interviews so far. This is the last one. I've just got to meet with the big head guy of Pernod, Joey Ranga was his name. And I walked in and I blew it. Like there was no chemistry between me and him. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe how that went. And sure as hell, I got the email from him about 2 weeks later saying, you know, we're not going to hire you, but we haven't found, you know, we're going to start the search all over again. So I emailed him back. I was like, man, I think you've made a mistake. I was like, look, here's what I'll do. I'll work for you for 3 months for free. I know you were sending us back to Scotland for education and all that stuff. I said, I'll pay for it myself. I was like, but I honestly think you made a mistake. And if you take this chance, I think you'll be happy. And he did. He emailed me back in like 4 minutes and said, I've never turned anybody down for a job and then have them email me back and say, I think you've made a mistake. So that's how I got that job at Glenlivet. And the rest is history, obviously, being an ambassador.
So did you work for free for 3 months?
No, I didn't. He actually said, look, this is, you've perked my interest here. That was really cool. You're obviously, you know, excited about getting this job. Yeah, chance ambassador. Yeah. And so he gave me the job.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah. I met his wife. We had a big dinner a few months later, or about a year later, and it was all people and their spouses. And I sat next to him and his wife introduced herself. And I said, yeah, I'm Richard. She goes, oh, you're the guy. You're the guy that called him and said he made a mistake by not hiring you. She said, before he called you back, he called me and told me, this guy just told me I made a mistake. Anyway, I always think it's a fun story and it's definitely a lesson learned. Don't, you know, make sure you give it every opportunity, give it every shot when you know, before somebody tells you absolutely no.
Well, there you go. 100% agreed. But like, so growing up in Paisley, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we've already discussed, a town where even the river wants to run out of it. Like the job came up, you were out in the States anyway, so it was like it was fortuitous that you were there. But did you have a passion for whiskey beforehand? Like, was your father a whiskey drinker? What was the
my dad and my uncle both worked for the company you guys worked for, William Grant. So they worked in warehousing. William Grant had a huge warehouse and boxing pallets and stuff like that in Paisley. And my dad and my uncle both worked there for like 25 years or something. And when I left high school, I actually had the opportunity to go work there, but it was, you know, sweeping the floor and doing all that kind of crap. So I was like, I'm too good for this. I'm 17. I'm an adult. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go see what the world looks like anyway. So yeah, so there was some kind of experience there, or, you know, I was familiar with the industry. Not as much as it would have been needed just starting the job, but Glenlivet and Pernod Ricard did a good job of education, as you know, most of the brands now are top notch at it.
Yep.
What year was that, Ricky? I think
when I came to the States, or when
you did the Glenlivet gig.
Oh,
from when to when?
2007 to 14, something like that. Or 2006 to 2006 to 2014.
That would have been an interesting time as well, because, you know, I suppose Nicholas and I were both 2010 when we started in the US, and it was still a little bit of the wild, wild west, and no one really kind of had a grasp on what ambassadors were doing, right? But I imagine 2007, like to that point, must have been a little bit crazy. What's one of your best stories from that those ambassador days?
Ah, God, I got to think of a bunch, but honestly, it was the Wild West. You ultimately were setting the standard for the job. Like, people were like, well, here's the three things you have to do. You have to go out there, teach our sales people around the country how to, you know, about the brand, do visits to bars and restaurants and teach the owners and staff in bars and restaurants, and then talk to the public about the brand and Scotch whiskey in general. And that was it. That was the guidelines. And then it was on top of that, and here's a massive expense account, so go do what you have to do. So I even managed to, I actually managed to overspend the massive spending account, the expense account they gave me, and I was hauled into the office, and my boss at the time was like, look, man, we give you a big account, but you're going over. What's the deal? And his boss came into the office and said, is he doing a good job? Or you know, are people getting the message? He's like, yeah, people are liking what he's doing. He's like, well, give him the money he needs. I was like, woo, even bigger expense account. But as far as stories are concerned,
actually, I've got a story about your expense account. Well, it's a question actually, because I want to know if this is just like you're one of these guys that's almost got like those urban legends that follow you around, Ricky. So I don't know if it's all true or not. But did you at one point not actually have to have a place to live because you stayed in so many hotel rooms that you just put all your stuff in a storage unit and lived in hotels for over a year?
No, the story of that is, when I got hired, I lived in Dallas, Texas, when Glenlivet hired me. And as soon as they hired me, they had me on the road. Like, they wanted me to live in New York. They asked me to come to New York, and that's where they wanted me to be based out of. And as soon as they hired me, they had this schedule. Like, they were putting me in every market, like, for 2 years straight. So I literally was on the road for 2 years straight. I wasn't in Manhattan long enough to find myself an apartment. So I lived on the road, like, for the most. And when I was in Manhattan, I was never there for any more than probably 2-3 weeks at the most at a time, and that wasn't very often. And usually it's because I was working, so it was expensed, so I could get a hotel. So for 2 years, I lived in hotels. It was the best thing ever, man. It was the best thing. In fact, when I did get an apartment, I was disappointed to come home the first night and my bed wasn't made. There was no chocolate on the pillow. So what the hell kind of lifestyle? Who lives this lifestyle? Like, having a place? Who wants that?
Mate, I think I remember speaking to you at one point as well, and this is obviously after you eventually bought a house, and you turned around and said to me, oh, I just Airbnb it out anyway, and I've made X amount of money this year through doing that, you know?
I did that too. And I lived in New York, because even when I lived there, I wasn't there very often. In fact, I lived on 57 between 9 and 10, which is about 4 blocks from where the cruise ships come in to New York. So I used to Airbnb my house on a Thursday. I would buy a cruise like $400 or $500, and the Airbnb would pay me like $800. So I would just leave the apartment for the weekend, jump on the cruise ship, go away for 4 days, and come back.
There you go.
So, mate, you've started up your whole production company, which we're going to get onto in a second. But before we get onto that, I want to just ask you a little bit about the whiskey industry right now. What are your thoughts on it? Are you missing it, being out of it now? How's that all working out for you?
I definitely miss it. I miss, and I'm not sure it's the same now because I'm not part of it, but I miss the camaraderie. I miss the group of ambassadors who get together at certain times throughout the year and just, get to visit Scotland is always the favorite trip. But I definitely miss it. I miss being in front of people, telling the story. Ultimately, that's what we are or that's what we were as ambassadors, just storytellers. Like, we didn't really have any massive skills except that we could get up there and entertain an audience and captivate them on the story of Scotch whiskey. So I definitely miss it. I love a lot of things that are going on in the industry now, a lot of the new distilleries that are coming up. And of course, this has been happening for years, but all the new expressions and the fact that everybody's willing to experiment and do different things. When I did first start as an ambassador, it was quite quite stuck up a little bit. It's almost like the wine industry, you know, you had to drink it a certain way. You could only use certain barrels. God forbid you put it in something that had a previous content, you know, a previous source in it. But it's come a long, long way. And yeah, I definitely miss it. One of my favorite things right now about the Scotch whisky industry is the fact that Harris Gin, who had a distillery in Harris, just released their whiskey last week. And I had the opportunity to go there several years ago and film some stuff, and I'm so excited for them. And it's a brilliant story, a brilliant product, and just really looking forward to what those guys are going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We chatted about that just recently, actually, Nicholas and I, and we've both got a little bottle of it, so we're going to chat about the actual tasting notes on that very shortly. Cool. But mate, back to you. So let's chat about this. You leave Glenlivet. You made your way into television and production. Was that like was it straight from whiskey, or was it more of like a winding road to get into that? How did that all come about?
It was definitely a winding road. So when I left Glenlivet, the reason that I left Glenlivet was because I loved doing what I was doing and telling the story of whiskey itself. That was the story. But in my audience, at the end of the day, when I do the Q&A, they were always asking these different questions like, where are you going next? Oh, I love your watch, man. Where'd you get that watch? Those are really cool shoes. Hey, where'd you get that suit? So I realized there was a market for not just, to present luxury brands, not just from a Scotch whisky point of view, but from a lifestyle branding point of view. So I started RD Crawford LLC because I'm not very creative, and that's the best I could come up with. And basically, I was doing the same thing for several lifestyle brands that I was doing for Scotch whisky. That ended up including some luxury hotels. So I had the opportunity to go to some hotels and do a little bit of filming, and it was so it was so like rough, like it was me on my phone or doing something for a little YouTube channel. And the hotel liked what we were doing. Then I was writing a lot for luxury magazines, and then adding video because video started to become part of the process and part of the media for branding. And then the big opportunity was I had a chance to go to a safari by Kempinski and Olalamara in Kenya. They wanted me to come and film there a little bit, which was a huge deal. I was like, this is amazing, fantastic. And I put a little thing on Facebook. I was like, hey, I'm looking for somebody, a cameraman who won't get paid, but you'll get to go on the safari in Africa. And my good partner now and good friend, Ben Alcott, my Australian producer, I reached out. I'd met him a few weeks before in Florida doing the zero gravity, where you go up in the plane and do the vomit comet. I'd met him there, and he goes, hey, man, I own a production company. I'll come with you. And from the show's point of view and us having that partnership, the rest is history.
You guys had met doing a flight that goes into zero gravity. You just skipped over that. Like, that's like an everyday occurrence for most people. Like, what the fuck? Like, come on, dude. Like, why don't you explain that as a chat? What was going on?
Yeah. So how they used to train astronauts for being in zero gravity is they'd send them up in this thing called the vomit comet. And it's basically a huge jumbo jet. They take out all the seats and everything, and it flies in parabolas. So it flies straight up, basically at a 90-degree angle almost, not quite. Yep. And then it comes over the top and it gets to an apex and comes back around and heads down again. And when you're sitting in a car and you go over a bump, you feel you kind of lift up and your stomach feels like it's coming up. Yep. Well, on this jumbo jet, that feeling of coming up and staying up lasts for about 20 seconds at the apex of the parabola. And they do it about 15 times. So you get to experience your body literally lifts up and stays. You're ultimately
falling.
Is falling. Yes, you're falling, but you're experiencing zero G inside the fuselage of this jumbo jet. So I was there to do a piece about it for luxury experiences, and Ben was there for his 40th birthday. Actually, he came over to Florida. He always wanted to do it, and that's where we met. So that experience was incredible. It's called Zero G for anybody that's interested.
Did you drink whiskey while you were doing it, though?
I didn't. No, I took up some, because you do these little tricks. So I took up some Skittles so that you can throw them up in the air and then you try and catch them, try and eat them. No, I wouldn't. I don't want to take the chance because it is called the vomit comet for a reason.
Did you lose your lunch?
No, I didn't. They give you some tips. Like fixate on a single focal point, and that helps. So it was really cool experience. I got to wear a flight suit too, and did this slow motion walk, with the Top Gun music playing in the background.
Was that just in your head, or was someone actually
No.
filming it?
Well, it was in my head, and then we filmed it, so we managed to capture it.
There you go. So on that note, like Mitch touched on this, like obviously you went into that production side of things, having done like luxury branding. Then you've got to leave no trace, right? So with the whiskey industry, like becoming much more eco-friendly, obviously this is something that we're going to focus on. But walk our listeners through what Leave No Trace is and what you've been doing in that show.
Right. So Leave No Trace is a TV show that travels the world highlighting eco and sustainable tourism, basically. Which when we initially started it, we realized that when you say ecotourism or sustainable travel, people used to automatically think, oh man, I'm going to be barefoot in a mud hut and eat berries, and that's going to be sustainable travel. But it's not. There's a lot of high-end luxury destinations, accommodations, resorts that are doing a lot for the environment, like a lot, and being real stewards for the environment, because ultimately they don't own the environment. So the trick for them is to give people the experience that they want them to have, but at the same time not impact the place that they're in. So these companies do a lot. So we highlight, Leave No Trace ultimately highlights luxury ecotourism and sustainable travel.
So what does that look like though? So give us an example of what are some of the places that you've been to? What are these hotels? Are these like trips and things like that? Like give us a few.
Yeah. So each episode,
some of the coolest stuff you've done.
Yeah. So each episode, there's a format to it. Typically what we do is we go to a single accommodation or resort or an organization that is doing something in an area. And one of the examples from season 1 that I can give you, there's an organization called Saniva, and they have some property in the Maldives. And they're them for us, the sustainability part of what they do, their programs, their foundations, what they implement, is the bar for us. Like we've never met anybody since that has done it as good as them, and hadn't met anybody before that. And just examples of what they do. Every part of their buildings, their villas are all recycled material. All their main beams are actually telegraph poles that came from the UK, because old wooden telegraph poles are not used anymore, but there was millions of them that had been cut down and been cut and ready to go before they started bringing in underground cables or whatever they did. They changed it out from those wooden poles. So they used thousands of them to build the foundations and their structures for these beautiful, very natural looking villas. They're doing a lot for the local community. So a part of the sustainable travel is not just about the travel itself and what these people are doing and the destination, but about giving back to local communities and social responsibility, basically, and protecting cultural heritage and all that stuff. So they hire locally, they train locally. They even offer, it's a very, very expensive place. It's very high end. In fact, Ben was looking to take his family there at Christmas, and for 7 nights, it was like 110 grand. It's crazy. It's silly money.
Wow.
But they offer, they offer their guests.
Did you put it back on the old Glenlivet expense account?
I might, yeah. I'll see if that card's still working. You never know. But what they offer their guests is, look, they for every if you spend 3 nights there, if you are willing to roll up the sleeves and go do some environmental work, like hands-on, clean the beach or do whatever, you'll get the next night for free. So there's a lot of that goes on. So they do a lot of really cool stuff, and that was from season 1, and that's a really good example.
So you're on season what now? Season 2? Well, you finished season 2, right?
We just finished it. Yeah, we just finished it, and I'm just showing off. But in season 2, we managed to get all 7 continents, which is, like, for me as a bucket list, is almost unbelievable. I still pinch myself.
So
and
explain to Mitch what the condiments are. It's not ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, right? Those are condiments, Mitch.
Can you draw me a picture, Ricky? Can you show me some kind of picture, like so I can visualize it?
See right up here, Mitch, behind me. That's North America.
Nice. Yeah.
That's South America. Africa.
Got it. Yeah, that works really well for our listeners, Ricky. Thanks very much.
Yeah, well, I thought you guys put this out on the air too. You mean I did my hair for nothing? I got Botox.
That's
I
you
got
done your hair.
Botox.
Fucking
I got
hell.
my lips done. I got my teeth cleaned. Although you can't tell. Got my hair cut.
Mate, you might want a refund. So, listen, you mentioned Harris recently. Have you done, when it comes to Leave No Trace, have you done anything in Scotland yet? Have you done anything with whiskey at all?
Yeah. So the episode, we did 10 episodes in season 1, and one of the episodes, episode 4 or 5, was Scotland, but it was Scotland from a very micro point of view because all we did was the Outer Hebrides, Harris and Lewis, or Lewis and Harris. So there's a whole episode about that, and it's how I got to meet the people at Harris Gin or the Harris Whiskey Distillery, because we actually did a piece of them in the episode. Yeah,
very cool.
So
very cool.
to that was one of my questions I was going to get. This is more of a pitch, Ricky, right? So I was just thinking, like, with all the eco-friendly stuff that's going on, like all these distilleries need to be net zero, right? In a very short space of time. So I think
is it 2040?
Yeah, 2040, yeah. But like, what about doing a little mini series, right? Just in Scotland, all about being eco-friendly, right? It's going to be called Leave No Tip, and it's just you and me and Mitch going around the bars in Scotland drinking whiskies from the distilleries that are net zero carbon emissions, and then we get kicked out at last call without tipping the staff, right? So that's the deal. What do you think? Leave no tip, and it's just us getting messy with eco-friendly whiskey making.
The first thing that comes to mind when you say that is, and I'm not sure how many, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are from Scotland. The first thing that comes to mind is the Still Game episode where Jack and Victor go to a distillery and go around like 10 times and then punch a hole in the cask. That's what that would look like.
Brilliant. I'm in. Let's get this rolling after this episode. Right, Ricky, quick fire round for you, mate. You ready for this?
Yep.
Best place that you've drunk whiskey in?
Antarctica.
Wellies or hiking boots?
Hiking boots.
If you could pick one place to live the rest of your life, where's it going to be?
Paris.
Dogs or cats?
Cats. I've got 2 of them.
Where in the world would you still like to travel and enjoy a dram?
I'd like to go to Japan, actually, and that's not me just pitching. I've just never been to Japan, and you know there's good whiskey coming out of Japan, right, Nicholas?
Subtle as a brick, mate.
Look at that. What a fucking grifter you are. You can take a boy out of Paisley, but you can't take Paisley out of a boy, right?
Look, all I'm just looking to get a Shibuya expensive car. That's all.
Well, never know how you operate. Good luck. I can sing for your supper, mate. Wax jacket or cagoule?
Oh, wax jacket for sure.
He had to be a wax jacket.
Yeah.
Look, Ricky and a cagoule. It's never going to happen.
I had one on for 20 years growing up in Paisley. I just like the change, the idea of change.
Hot and sunny beach or cold, wet and mountainous?
Oh, cold, wet and mountainous. I've actually found that out through the course of doing the show.
There you go. Last one. You don't need to answer it. Nicholas or Mitch?
Nah. I love you guys, the podcast. It's the best.
You don't need to pick favourites, mate. You don't need to pick favourites, but thanks for picking me. I can see where you're going. Yeah, your lips aren't moving, but your eyes are doing all the talking. I can see that.
Well, Ricky, listen, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for spending your time. We know you're a busy boy, so but before we go, we always like to give whoever's coming on the show a quick plug. So let's chat about where people can find you, where they can find the program, all that good stuff.
Right. So your listeners in Asia can find me on Nat Geo. Your listeners in the UK, I'm on Sky TV, their EarthX channel called EarthX TV. Here in the US, we're on a couple of streaming platforms. We were on Amazon Prime, but I don't believe it's on there anymore. But we're on Plex, YouTube TV. We're on there, and then EarthX TV, which is I think Direct TV satellite and Verizon cable, whatever that is. So there's plenty of places for people to watch it.
What about your website and your social?
Website, leavenotrace.tv, and the socials are at Leave No Trace TV on Instagram and at Leave No Trace TV on Facebook.
And what about you if people just want to creep you?
Well, they can call me at 1-800-HOTMAIL.
Like Hotmail.
Hotmail, yeah. MELE.
Aye, is that a dial-up connection, Ricky? You get the old CD burning.
Yeah.
Well, look, guys, thanks very much for tuning in. Ricky, thanks for coming on the show. That was a blast. Likewise, for all the listeners out there, please be sure to smash the like button on the show, and more importantly, smash the old follow button wherever you're listening to this podcast. Mitch, enjoy the rest of your time in New York City, mate. I'm jealous. This is you wrapping up your tour de New York, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Fly out tomorrow night, so I'll be next recording will be from sunny Speyside. But yeah, man. But yeah, like Nicholas says, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time round.
Bye.